good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy back, hometown commander, and we are back for another episode of Millsy Brews, or in this case, Andrew Brews, the short we brew. A version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on our quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. Andrew's working on getting his setup done so he can try to do some of these videos on his own. But for now, you got me. You're stuck with me going over Andrew's list. And I have to say, I think Andrew's been doing a great job lately at just putting up some decks to be just slightly different than mine, a little bit different of a build type and a play type. Hope you guys are enjoying the diversity of the content. But today, Andrew joined me on the Strixhaven theme for this week and went for one of his favorite cards from this set of both set and decks, and that is Osgir the Reconstructor, 2 red-white for a 4/4 giant artificer vigilance, 1 sacrifice an artifact to have target creature we control get +2/+0 until end of turn. And then X and tap it, exile an artifact with mana value X from your graveyard to make 2 tokens of it that are copies of it and activate only as a sorcery. So Osgir, of course, playing around with this red-white artifacts that the Lorehold College from Strixhaven cared so much about. And artifacts are always a very interesting subtype. There's a lot of dirty things we can do with them. There's a lot of really fun things we can do with them. And I think his list has done a really good job at just giving us a bunch of artifacts we want to copy and taking advantage of all of the abilities we get when we have a ton of artifacts. If you're not interested in hearing me go through every card in the deck, the deck list is going to be down in the description, as well as at the end. We're going to be doing a little bit of a goldfish with it, and timestamps will be down in the description if that's what you want to do. Getting into the lands. I think this is pretty solid for Source of Mana goes. I like that we're getting those artifact lands in the Darksteel Citadels and the Ancient and the Great Furnace. This is great for all of our cards that care about how many artifacts we have. This is going to help out there. Lots of good choices as far as red-white lands go. We have the Slayer Stronghold, which I think is going to help a ton. Can give one of those tokens we make. If it's a big creature, we can give it haste. It can give a lot of other things haste. It could even give Osgir haste if we needed to, if it came down a second or third time. So I like it. And of course, gotta play that campus. We're trying our best to play the campuses and all the deck this week. Enchantments, just 2 of them, and I think they're 2 pretty obvious choices. First off, I know in Procession, gonna make Osgir's 2 into 4. Killer good. I mean, anytime you can double the amount of tokens you're making, you're just gonna generate more value. I remember that's every time we create a token, not just with Osgir's ability, right? So any token we make is going to get doubled, including the Smothering Tithe sitting next to it. Smothering Tithe, of course, a white commander staple, and it's a staple for a reason because it makes treasures and ramps us up on mana. I love Smothering Tithe. That's a card that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people hate on Smothering Tithe, but I think it's a card that it does a lot of good, and you're only going to see it, right, so many times out of 10. It's not like you're going to see this card every time you play the deck, but when you do see it, man, does it ramp really well. Getting into the artifacts, we got a big pile of artifacts, and this isn't all of our artifacts, right? We have artifact creatures up top too. We, of course, want to make copies of some fun artifact creatures, but here we have the artifacts in the deck. Arcane Signet, of course, for that mana, and of course Arcane Signet is now a staple along Soul Ring for its ability to give us any color. Archaeomancer's Map, it comes in, we search our library up to 2 planes, put them into our hand. Basic planes, those, we can't go get any dual lands with them, but whenever a land enters the battlefield under our opponent's control, if that player has more lands than us, we can put a land from our hand on the battlefield. This is great. This is another one of these modern white kind of ramp staples, trying to get options outside of just like land tax, which was the most popular white card in the past. I really like Archaeomancer's Map. One, it's an artifact, so we could do this with Osgir, get 2 of them, get 4 planes to our hand, and have more in our hand. But also, it's just it's a great artifact that can ramp us and in a color combination that doesn't get a lot of ramp. And then these sit on the battlefield and count for artifact count. Battle Mage's Bracer is a great card. A creature has haste, and then whenever an activity of a creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you can pay 1 if you do copy it. I like the Bracers. Bracers seem pretty darn obvious for Osgir. The only downside to the Bracers, and this is a thing if you're playing Osgir, if you're going to play a deck like this and you're going to have the Bracers, the thing you got to be careful of is when you copy the ability, you're going to have to get an artifact with the same mana cost and a different artifact, right? The 2 copies of the ability can't target the same artifact because the artifact gets exiled as part of the ability. So let's say we wanted to get a I don't know, a Commander Sphere and a Rings of Bright Hearth out of our graveyard, well, we could copy it and get both of them. But you just have to be careful, and the X has to be the same because Osgir, it's not X or less, it's X straight. So that's just one thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're using the bracers. Boros Signet for some mana, Commander Sphere some mana, something like that, sacrificing to draw a card makes it almost even better for us to try to get back out of our graveyard so we could just sack them for the extra. Curse Mirror is a card I absolutely love. This card's a ton of fun. It enters the battlefield, you can have it become a copy of target creature until end of turn, except it has haste. That's great because if we have a pretty big artifact creature down, or if we're abusing any of the constructs that have power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts we control, or if we've got a pretty fun big creature like a Triplicate Titan or some of these big artifact creatures that just do a lot of fun, we can make this copy of it till end of turn, and then the turn after that it just becomes a mana rock again. Curse Mirror tends to generally be used to either to start a combo line, or just give you an extra copy of a creature you already want to use anyway, and then use it for that turn. Dispeller's Capside, 2 and a white capsule, 2 and a white, tap it, sack it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Well, this is great. Again, something we don't mind getting back out of our graveyard because it's only going to be 1 for 2 of them, and then we're going to take it out. Enchantress decks get this kind of ability for 1 or 2 to put down and then free to come out and sacrifice. But I like that we have access to something like this. We have access to something like this still, even though we're not in that type of strategy. Acre Wellspring seems great. Draw a card when it comes in, and then draw a card when it leaves the battlefield to the graveyard. Love it. Mindstone, a little bit of draw, and again, some mana as well on it. Mycosynth Wellspring, whenever it enters the battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you could search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. This is great because we're going to get it when it comes in, and we can get it if we sacrifice it. So I like it. Again, I want to find those artifacts that net us value when they come in or leave. Portal Phyrexia seems like a bomb in a deck like this. And enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, we could put a creature from any graveyard on the battlefield under control, and it turns into a Phyrexia. And this is great because if we have just one of them, great. This card can take over a game. But if we were to get it back out of the graveyard with Osgir, that could be tough for our opponents. Having to sacrifice 6, 9, 12 creatures, depending on how many of them come back in, and then just reanimating a bunch of them. I love it. Portal Phyrexia is probably one of the reasons you run a deck like this and have fun with it. Rings of Bright Hearth. Whenever you activate ability, if it is a mana value, you could pay 2. If you do copy that ability, you choose new targets for the copy. Again, same thing that we said about Battle Mage's Bracers. You have to pick a different artifact, but if we have lots of artifacts with similar mana costs, well then cool, we can gain good value. Sculpting Steel seems great in a deck like this, coming in as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield, not just ours, anyone. So we can copy an opponent's, Soul Ring if we needed to. If we didn't have one, we could copy our opponent's pretty big artifact if we needed to. I like Sculpting Steel. It relies on, I think, if you're putting something like Sculpting Steel in your deck, you're trying to make sure you have good enough artifacts on your own to copy, but you're willing to copy your opponents if you need to. Soul Ring for the mana, Talisman for the mana, and 1,000-Year Elixir, you may activate abilities of creatures you control as though those creatures had haste, so Osgir could use his ability the turn he comes in, and some of our other artifact creature or other creatures as well, but just pay 1 and untap target creature. So I like that because 1,000-Year Storm doesn't just have to untap Osgir. We can attack with an artifact creature and untap it. 1,000-Year Elixir does that multi-part thing, right? It can untap Osgir, but it also can untap some of our big creatures to block. Get up into the spells, and I love it here. We got a great mix of removal, great mix of value, great mix of protection. Boros Charm, right? Can make our board indestructible, or can give a big artifact creature double strike. Clever Concealment to protect the board. Clever Concealment can phase out all of our non-land permanents for just 4 mana, and if we can convoke this by tapping creatures, that's even better. Protect our entire board from a board wipe or a farewell or something like that, and they get brought back in. Dispatch in an artifact deck is almost strictly better than a Path to Exile or a Swords because you get to just exile it instead of giving them any benefit for it. I love Dispatch, and I will happily put Dispatch in any artifact deck I build that has white in it because as long as we have 3 artifacts, we just exile that creature flat out. No bonus to our opponents. Heartwarming Redemption, pitch our whole hand, draw that many cards, +1 and gain life, go for the number of cards. This is great because we can, if we have the things we like in our hand, we can load them up for Osgir in our graveyard. Return to Dust, a classic commander staple. Exile target artifact or enchantment at instant speed. If we do it on our main phase, we get to do 2 of them instead. That's great. Return to Dust is definitely a card seeing less and less play over time, but I still really like it. I like it because it can hit 2 in your main phase, but I think most people would probably rather run Generous Gift or a new card like Excise the Imperfect from Phyrexian Obi-Wan that can hit any non-land permanent. So there's options in removal, even in just these two colors, but I see where Andrew's going for. Return the Dust on your main phase can do a lot of really good. Swords to Plowshares for some removal, throw the possibility to pitch a card and draw two. I love effects like this in this deck because you can load the cards you want into your graveyard and then draw. I might have played like a big score, Unexpected Windfall, or like Seize the Spoils, get a couple treasures through the process and kind of dump those cards in. And then Wear and Tear, one of my favorite removal spells in Boros. Get rid of an artifact, get rid of enchantment, or get rid of both. Love a card like this. And the difference between this and Return to Dust, because someone's going to say, well, Milzy, you just said 4 mana Return to Dust isn't good, and it isn't as good. And you're right. The difference is this is completely at instant speed, and I can do 2 of them at instant speed or pick my choice, right, for 1 or 2 mana, whereas this is automatically 4, and I have to do it on my turn to get the value. So to me, that's the main difference. But I think it's a little nitpicky, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Return the Dust will still be a very good removal card. Cathartic Reunion, again, discard 2, draw 3. So he's getting into this, and see Faithful Soldier right beside it, draw 2 and then discard 2. So you could see it's there. I think I just like big score and Unexpected Windfall because you go up the treasures, so you actually go up some mana in the process. But I could see why the decisions are being made in that sense. Search your library for an artifact, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle, and then discard a card at random. If you discard an artifact this way, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is a card that Andrew and I raved about on our Aftermath episode on the podcast, and I really like this card. It's perfect for a deck like this. You probably want to pitch an artifact anyway, so you don't mind if one gets exiled or pitched. And if you pitch the wrong artifact, well, hopefully you can just get Osgir down and get it back. So I like Reckless Handling. It's almost a better gamble in a deck like this because it can deal that damage. Reconstruct History. Return up to 1 target artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, planeswalker from a graveyard to our hand, and then exile it. So that's great because we can get a bunch of things back after we use them, or if they get pitched by one of our spells, we can get them back that way. Rip Apart for a little bit of removal can hit an artifact or enchantment or throw damage to a creature or planeswalker. Love that. Thrilling Discovery, my favorite Lorehold cards of all time, just to see Quintorius swinging across the vine there in Indiana Jones style. Gain 2 life, discard 2, draw 3. Again, we're loading up our graveyard, using them with Osgir's ability. And then Wake the Past. Here's our, if we accidentally get too many in the graveyard, bring them all back. And they all get haste. Love it. This is great. Bring them all back. Probably could play like Brilliant Restoration if we wanted to as well. There's plenty of things we can play in that slot. But Wake the Past seems perfectly fine for what we're trying to do. And, of course, has that pretty Lorehold watermark. Before we get into the creatures, we'll talk about our 1 Planeswalker playing Doretti Scrap Savant, and it seems like a great choice for this deck because Doretti is a very popular Planeswalker card when it comes to artifact decks. That +2, discard up to 2, then draw that many, can load our graveyard for Osgir. -2, sack an artifact, return target artifact from our graveyard to the battlefield. This is great because if we pick the right thing, then that thing can go back to the graveyard and we could do it again if need be, or we can play around with it a little bit more. The difference between this and Osgir is actually exiling the thing that we're getting, whereas this just puts it back in the graveyard when it dies. So this is an important effect. Then the -10, whenever an artifact is put in your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So this is great too, because then we can start sacrificing things for effects or do a lot of really fun things. But let's talk with the creature base here. And I really like this creature base. I see a lot of really good things in it. I can see that Andrew's taking real advantage of the artifacts that we have. Not every creature in this deck is an artifact, but every creature in this deck cares about artifacts in some way. Audacious Reshapers. Second artifact, reveal cards on the top until you reveal an artifact. Put that card on the battlefield, and it deals damage to you equal to the number of cards revealed this way. Hopefully we're playing enough artifacts that we don't take any damage, but I don't think we mind because we get that artifact into the graveyard and get another one onto the battlefield. Bosch, we're playing Bosch. Big boy, 6/7, 3 in a red, sacrifice an artifact. It deals damage equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value to any target. So just a big boy. He can hit, he has trample. So not a bad idea to power him up, but then he can deal some damage. Chiskoria, Forest Tyrant. We talked about Chiskoria last week in Andrew's deck. Again, we're going to talk about it again. Affinity for artifacts, big old dragon. Whenever it attacks, we exile the top 5, and we can cast an artifact from among them this turn. If you do, it has affinity for artifacts. I like the idea of Chiskoria. I said it in last week's video as well. I just think exiling the top 5 is kind of dangerous when you only get to play 1. It leads to some feel bad situations where you could just get rid of the things you really need. But I think more often than not, Chiskoria is going to lead to a lot of really good value. Combustible Gear Hulk, when enters the battlefield, target opponent may have us draw 3. If they don't, we mill 3, and then it deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. And this is great because we're just loading our graveyard up with cards for Osgir. Digside Engineer. Whenever we cast an artifact, we can pay 2. If we do, we get a 0/0 construct that gets +1/+1 for each artifact we control. This is one of those cards that we want to get this thing out and get as many of those constructs as we can. Those constructs hit hard, and they're going to hit our opponents hard. Duplicate. When it enters the battlefield, we exile a target non-token creature. And as long as the card exiled with Duplicate is a creature card, it has the power, toughness, creature types of the last card exiled with Duplicate, and it's still a shapeshifter. So depending on what we exile with this, it can be pretty darn good. So I like this. The cool part about this is it's not our creature, so we're probably just hitting our opponent's creatures, and then we get its power, toughness, and creature types, right? So we get rid of our opponent's things and kind of net the value. So this is another, again, great target for Osgir. Esper Sentinel, everyone's favorite 1 mana value engine. Whenever our opponents cast their first non-creature spell each turn, we draw a card unless they pay X, where X is its power. So the bigger it is, the more they have to pay. But again, the point of Esper Sentinel is you get it down, and we're just going to draw a couple cards over the point of the game. If we can use Osgir on this, hopefully we can start drawing more than that. But your goal is just to draw a few incremental cards over the game. Felon the Third Path card I love. Get things back from the graveyard, except they come back as artifacts in addition to their own types, and they gain haste. So the cool part about something like Felon the Path is we have some creatures that have ETB abilities. We get the ETB when it comes in. We get the dying trigger. I like Felden. It's a great card. It's usable in other decks, but it's great here because it makes that creature an artifact. Foundry Inspector, everything cost them 1 less. Love it. Goblin Engineer, when it enters the battlefield, we can search our library for an artifact, put it into our graveyard, then shuffle, so we can have this come in and load something up for Osgir. And then tap a red, sacrifice an artifact, tap it, return target artifact card with criminal mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, so we can get something back if need be. But mainly, we're just loading a card up for Osgir, getting it ready to go. Hellkite Tyrant's a card that's probably going to be very good in this deck because it's going to be pretty darn easy to get to 20 artifacts. Of course, it says beginning of our upkeep. If we control 2 or more artifacts, we win the game. But we really love the ability above it as well. Whenever deals combat damage to a player, we gain control of our artifacts that player controls. So we can take away someone's mana rocks. We can take away their treasures. Of course, they can just sacrifice those treasures before we take them. But the point is, for all those token artifacts, they're probably just going to sacrifice them if they can to not let us have them. But we're going to take all their mana rocks and all that good stuff. A Genie and a Star Artillerist. Anytime one of our artifacts in the battlefield does that much damage to each opponent, we're going to be making a lot of artifacts. We're going to be making a lot of different things and tokens and all that kind of stuff. So this is going to hit our opponent. This is kind of like Reckless Fire River. We're just going to deal damage every time artifacts come in. We're tricking out that new Karn. Its power and toughness equal to the highest mana value among artifacts we control. So we love that, like Portals of Phyrexia being at 9, or that Triplicate Titan that we'll talk about at the end at 9. So gives us a big thing that we can work up to. But it says at the beginning of our upkeep, we add colorless mana for each artifact we control. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells, and we don't lose it until our turn ends. So I like Karn. It's going to get pretty big, depending on the biggest things we have out there, and it's going to give us extra mana to use for our big boys. Kodotha Forge Master, sack 3 artifacts, search your library for an artifact, and put it on the battlefield. That's going to get tough to deal with. There's some great artifacts in the deck that we want, and it doesn't say creature, it just says artifacts. So with 3 artifacts in this, we can go get that portal if we need it. We can go get a lot of things, and this is a fun card for that. Lashiel, Clockwork Scholar, prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking artifact creatures control. Perfect. Now we can swing with all of our artifacts or artifact tokens for free. And then whenever one of our creatures enter the battlefield, artifact creatures enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So now we can hopefully get a card every one of our turns. And then if we have any ways to make tokens on our opponent's turn, we can get one on their turn as well. Loyal Apprentice, gonna make us a Thopter every one of our combats as long as we control our commander. And that token gets haste. Love it. Can swing in with it, or we can trigger things like Lashiel. Mondrak to double our tokens seems really great. Again, Osgir is making tokens, so anything we can do to double those tokens is going to be great. And then we can make it indestructible. Mirror Battlefield. Mirror Battlefield is a card that, of course, very well played in artifact decks. Any way to reduce this is great, getting it out for cheaper. But it comes in and gives us 4 mirror. And then whenever it attacks, we can tap as many untapped mirror as we want. If we do, it gets +X/+O until end of turn and deals X damage to target player or planeswalker it's attacking. So we can swing this in, tap a bunch of the mirror that hopefully come with it, hurt our opponent in the process, and then they still have to deal with the hopefully 14, 15, 16, 7 that's attacking. And again, it makes the mirror when it comes in, so hopefully we can get a bunch of mirror on the battlefield and keep figuring out. This is a great like Felden target, just bringing it back out, making more mirror and tapping them when it attacks. So I think to me, it's almost one of the most perfect Feldon targets in the deck, keep getting more mirror, bringing it back out. Ornithopter pairs for some mana. Playing Oswald Fiddlebender, probably a perfect card for this deck. It's kind of a pseudo. It's a pseudopod effect for artifacts. We could sacrifice an artifact and then get an artifact with 1 plus that art mana value and put it onto the battlefield. This is great because we could take an artifact, put it in our graveyard for Osgir to get us back, and then go get 1 higher. So I love Fiddlebender. It's a great choice of a alternate commander in the deck that's going to help us out. We have Phyrexian Triniform. Whenever it dies, we make 3/3/3 tokens, and it has Encore 12. So for 12, we can exile this card from our graveyard. For each opponent, create a token that attacks that opponent with this turn if able. They gain haste, sacrifice them. So that's not bad either, because then, right, we do that if we have 3 opponents. They all have a 9/9 coming at them, and then we just make we hopefully make 9 3/3s as well when it dies. So Triniform is great. Pianalar. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we get a Thopter. For 2 mana, we can give an artifact a buff, or for sacrificing an artifact, we can make a creature not block this turn. That could be pretty helpful to get something we really need through, and hurt our opponent. And again, not another bad Feldon target if we just need to get an artifact token. Quicksmith Genius. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may discard a card. If you do, a draw card. Again, here's another great draw outlet. Get something into our graveyard. We need to get it back. Scrap Trawler. Whenever it or another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. Target artifact in your graveyard with less mana value. Scrap Trawler is a part of a lot of artifact combos in Commander. I don't really see those here in Andrew's Brew, but I think Scrap Trawler is just going to help us get back some small things. If a big artifact is dying, right, we can get a bunch of littler ones back. Skrelv seems perfect for this deck. Can give one of our creatures toxic 1 and hexproof from a color, and it can't be blocked by creatures that color. That can help us attack certain opponents, get them through. And the toxic does stack up. It won't stack up that much, but it will stack up somewhat. And then Solemn Simulacrum, aka Sad Robot. When it enters, you may search your library for a basic land, put it on tapped, and then shuffle. And then whenever it dies, you draw a card again. Another great target for Osgir. Comes and gets us the land, dies, draws a card, make the 2 copies, get us 2 lands, die, draws 2 cards. You can see, and Solemn's another great target for something like Feldon on the 3rd path, just getting it back, and because that copy sacrifices itself at the end step, we're going to get that die trigger. Steel Hellkite, a card that I really like. For X mana, destroy each non-land permanent with current mana cost X from whose controller was dealt damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. So if we attack somebody and we hit, we can pay X. If we do, destroy every permanent they have with that mana cost. So we're playing a tokens deck. We just play 0, destroy all their tokens. Again, Steel Hellkite's a great card, and it does a really good job. And then Triplicate Titan. This is one of our big boys. Vigilance, Trample, Flying. Whenever it dies, create a 3/3 golem with flying, 3/3 golem with vigilance, and a 3/3 golem with trample. So another just like that Triniform, another big artifact that we can hopefully just feld and keep bringing back, and then keep dying and keep getting value for it. Those are the only 2 I can think of that really do that. I mean, the only other one would be like Wormcoil Engine, but it's a little more expensive, so I can understand maybe why Andrew wouldn't want to put that one in the deck, but that would be another option. We could play like Metalwork Colossus. I think maybe more nasty version of this deck would play something like Blightsteel Colossus as well for those big artifacts. But I like these 2. They seem like really great Feldon targets, as well as great Osgir targets as well. But all right, we went through the deck. Let's give it a quick playtest. Playtesting a deck is always fun because you, in a lot of ways, get to learn what you're looking for. Only a 1-lander, so we're going to take our free Mully there. And that's a hand I'm willing to keep, 3 landers, so let's do it. Turn 1, I think my best play is to do this. We could Faithless Looting, but I'm not entirely sure what we're going to find, so let's do it. Faithless Looting. Let's just confirm. I believe it's draw, then discard. So we draw 2, and then discard 2. So I would probably dump the Commander Sphere is a great target for Osgir, and we would be able to do it fairly quickly. Let's dump the duplicate, get it ready for Osgir in the graveyard. And then I kind of like the Triplicate Titan into the graveyard for Osgir as well, if we can get there. All right, turn 2, put the Ancient Den down, and nothing quite yet. Turn 3, get 1 down, get our Commander Sphere down. Turn 4, the Furnace, and then I think Osgir. And then turn 5, we could do Dig Site and then the Wellspring, and unfortunately we wouldn't have enough mana to get it off of it. But then we'd keep going and then, get the Felden Path down, and now we have the chance to bring these things back on the next turn. So I like it. That was a pretty darn good start. Let's go one more time. I love this hand. Love this the Smothering Tithe. Unfortunately, we only have 2 lands. 2 lands seems a little too greedy in a deck like this, so we gotta mull it back down. Here we are, 3 lands and a Skrelv. I like it. So turn 1, I'd probably toss the command tower down and that Skrelv, just so we have it there and have it ready. Turn 2, put this Plains down. We have the Rip Apart if there was something we needed to get rid of, but I doubt it. We're still pretty early in the game. Turn 3, unfortunately, we see that Arcane Signet just a turn too late. We'll throw that down. Turn 4, get this down, get the Osgir down, and we have enough mana to protect the Osgir with Skrelv. Turn 5, get that down. I kind of like Sculpting, stealing the artifact here, the Arcane Signet here, and then getting Felden down. And then now we have the Forge Master. We can get the Forge Master down and go from there. Throw the possibility just a little bit too late there. But as you can see, we're building the board up. And like I said, the first game, that first Goldfish, we got to see a lot of me dumping things into the graveyard and getting stuff ready. This time, not as much, but I think we're still okay with getting this set up ready, getting it together. Because now with this Forge Master, the next turn, get rid of this, get rid of the Skrelv, get rid of the Arcane Signet, maybe go get something and get the Arcane Signet back with Osgir on that turn. So I like that. I think we're still setting up, even though it doesn't look pretty. And on this turn, we might even be able to just throw the possibility to see what we get as well. So I like it. Not too bad. Again, one of those decks where it's probably going to end up being one of those decks, as a warning. Some decks just require you to pilot them a few times, understand what you're looking for, what cards are best to play, what cards are best to dump into the graveyard. Those are the things that you find out when you test, and we lose a little bit of just doing version 1.0 without the testing, but you'll learn so many of those lessons after you test. And that's the thing I try to preach the most on the channel, especially with us doing these version 1.0 deck lists, is we haven't learned any of we try our best to predict these intricacies when we're brewing, but at the end of the day, you don't learn a lot of it until you actually physically play the deck. You run it through its paces, and then you learn, oh, hey, this works really well when you pair this with this, and etc. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Like I said, deck list is in the description. Subscribe to the channel if you like the content. Drop me a like if you like the content. And I will catch you guys next time.